Detroit has a bad rap when it comes to crime, violence and drugs. But nothing is worse than having an arsonist plaguing the streets, destroying homes and neighborhoods with a single match. In 2006, an arsonist managed to destroy a library, a school, an apartment complex and a nursing home within an 8-week period. The police were using every resource available to locate this sick firebug, but they never found any clues or suspects in the devastating crimes. 2 months after the last fire, there was a 911 call that made the news, as the call claimed that the arsonist in question was about to strike, and sure enough, he did. In the call you can hear the panicked screams as the residents of yet another apartment complex fled for their lives and tried desperately to put out the flames. But the most startling moment came when the caller began crying out in pain as he had become trapped in the burning building, the flames scorching his entire body. No one knew what became of the mystery caller, and it was believed that he had perished in the fire. The building was burned to the ground, leaving almost 100 people homeless. A small memorial was constructed at the ruins of the building in honor of the unknown man who called 911 and saved many lives. The police knew that arsonists loved to return to the scene of their crimes, to admire their work and the destruction. Setting up a few surveillance cameras at the memorial, the police painstakingly awaited any suspicious individuals who might stop by. It only took them about 3 weeks to finally locate a suspect. In the footage of a camera, a tall man, wearing a black hood and a bandana with a skeletal depiction of the human jaw over his mouth, approached the memorial and just stared at the charred ruins of the apartment building. He stared for hours, barely moving and never turning his gaze. When another person began approaching the memorial, he suddenly turned away and walked down the sidewalk out of sight. The man returned night after night for almost a week. Each time he did the same thing, stared at the ruins in awe and shied away from anyone who approached. Except on the 7th night, a woman was walking her dog and passed by the man. He turned and smiled at her and frightened her to no end. She reported the strange man to the police, claiming that he was grinning wickedly and smelled of gasoline and smoke. 2 nights later, another building was torched by the arsonist. An abandoned warehouse, which still had surveillance cameras running. The same man from the memorial appeared at the scene wearing the same hoodie and bandana. Witnesses to the fire claimed to have seen a man running from the warehouse wearing a dark hoodie, and the weird thing was he seemed to be smiling. A twisted, almost impossible huge grin on his face. The police were able to pick up a trail using scent tracking hounds. The dogs led the police to a small, run-down house on the outskirts of the city. Inside was a lone occupant wearing that same hoodie. Aside from the arsonist, there were gallons of gasoline, butane, matches, lighters and a newspaper clippings talking about the series of arson-set fires. When the police cornered the man and ordered him to the ground, they were horrified by the man's face. He had never been wearing a bandana. His actual jaw had been exposed, leaving him with a perpetual grin burned onto his face. This man had been the one who called 911 and seemingly died in the blaze. He had been horrifically burned but survived, his face nothing more than a monument to the sickness that is arson. The man laughed a little and looked at the police as he struggled to speak, his lipless grin mocking everyone who dared to look at him. "It's about time you found me," he arrogantly replied with a hoarse, raspy voice. "I was going to give you guys another call. But what's the fun in that?" The grinning man was arrested but died from a severe infection before he could even stand trial. Even though he's gone, his actions and crimes will forever haunt the city, leaving scars that will never heal.
The slender man is a being, male in appearance, who looks like a man with extremely long, slender arms and legs. He also appears to have 4 to 8 long, black tentacles that protrude from his back, though different photographs and enthusiasts disagree on this fact, and therefore it is theorized he can contract these tentacles at will. He is described as wearing a black suit strikingly similar to the visage of the notorious Men in Black, and as the name suggests, appears very thin and able to stretch his limbs and torso to inhuman lengths in order to induce fear and ensnare his prey. Once his arms are outstretched, his victims are put into something of a hypnotized state, where they are utterly helpless to stop themselves from walking into them. He is also able to create tendrils from his fingers and back that he uses to walk on in a similar fashion to Dr. Octopus. The superhuman stretching ability could also be seen as a similarity between himself and Mr. Fantastic. Whether he absorbs, kills, or merely takes his victims to an undisclosed location or dimension is also unknown, as there are never any bodies or evidence left behind in his wake to deduce a definite conclusion. His face is pale and slightly ghostly, and almost appears to have been wrapped in a type of gauze or cloth. His facial features are also an object of debate, and many people believe that his face looks different to each person, if it is seen at all. He sometimes is portrayed wears a hat, which is sometimes a bowler, a fedora, or sometimes a top hat. He may also be seen wearing a long flowing necktie or scarf, which is either red or gray. He often keeps his long, pale hands crossed politely behind his back or hanging loosely at his sides. His suit is black, sometimes portrayed as pinstripe in artwork, a common misconception thanks to the very similar Jack Skellington from Nightmare Before Christmas. He has long coattails which he lets float proudly. He wears long dress shoes, which are always shined a perfect, gleaming black. Much of the fascination with Slender Man is rooted in the overall aura of mystery that he is wrapped in. Despite the fact that it is rumored he kills children almost exclusively, it is difficult to say whether or not his only objective is slaughter. Oftentimes it is either reported or recorded that he can be found in sections of woods, and these generally tend to be suburban. He also has been reported seen with large groups of children, as many photographs portray. It is commonly thought that he resides in woods and forests and preys on children. He seems unconcerned with being exposed in the daylight or captured in photos. It is often thought as well that he enjoys stalking people who become overly paranoid about his existence, purposefully giving them glimpses of himself in order to further frighten them. For this reason, it seems like Slender Man very much enjoys psychologically torturing his victims. He also often appears to float or drift around rather than walk, which suggests the possibility of him being an ethereal being rather than a creature or a man. This would also explain why he is able to remain mobile in spite of his poorly proportioned body. Even though Slender Man was fabricated on something awful forums, or was he? Some people have already claimed sightings. He is seen mostly at night peering into open windows and walks out in front of lone motorists on secluded roads. His main intentions appear to be kidnapping children, as when he is seen near them in photographs, they usually disappear shortly afterwards. The Slender Man has also inspired many stories such as those of marble hornets. In the end though, his purpose remains unknown. There has been a big misconception about my pal the Slender Man due to the appearance of this article. He does not have hair or a face. Everything else is correct. There is also some questioning as to whether or not there is more than one. I find that unlikely. It's most likely Slendy fucking with your head in order to make you think that there is more than one, which he has been known to do. As of now, Slendy has 3 or 4 known accomplices.
In the late 1800s, Thomas Otto and his family moved into a mansion at the corner of Eden and Simonton Streets in Key West, Florida, now known as the Artist House. The Ottos were known to be stern with their servants, sometimes even mistreating them. It was the treatment of one such Haitian servant that provides a twist in this story. This woman was hired to take care of their son, Robert. One day, Mrs. Otto supposedly witnessed her practicing black magic in their backyard and fired her. Before she left, the woman gave Robert a lifelike doll which stood 3 feet tall, had buttons for eyes, human hair, believed to be Robert's, and was filled with straw. Dolls that resembled children were not unheard of during this time, but this one proved to be special. Robert named the doll after himself and often dressed it in his clothes. Robert, the doll, became his trustworthy companion. He took it with him on shopping trips into town. The doll had a seat at the dinner table where Robert would sneak it bites of food when his parents weren't looking. Robert would even be tucked into bed with the boy at night. Soon this innocent relationship took on a strange nature. Soon after, Robert chose to be referred to by his middle name, Jean, after being scolded by his mother. He told her that Robert was the doll's name, not his. Jean was often heard in his toy room having conversations with Robert. Jean would say something in his childish manner and responses could be heard in a much lower voice. Sometimes Jean would become very agitated, worrying the servants and his mother. She would, on occasion, burst in to find her son cowering in a corner while Robert sat perched in a chair or on the bed glaring at him. This was only the beginning. Household objects would be found thrown across the room, Jean's toys turned up mutilated, and giggling could be heard. Whenever these unusual acts took place, Jean always said, "Robert did it." The boy took the punishment but always insisted that the blame was Robert's. As the mischief grew, more and more servants took their leave as new ones were hired. The Otto's relatives felt it was time to do something. With the recommendation of a great-aunt, Jean's parents removed Robert from his care and placed him in a box in the attic. This is where he resided for many years. After the death of his father, Jean was willed his boyhood home. He decided to live in the Victorian mansion with his new wife. Jean had become an artist, and felt
Item, SCP-016. Object Class, PETA. Special Containment Procedures, SCP-016 is to remain within the confines of a 5x5x5, 5x5x5 meter room at all times, maintained at a temperature not to exceed 0 degrees Celsius. SCP-016 itself is to remain in the Petri dish in the containment cube at all times unless directed otherwise by Level 4 or 05 personnel. Full documentation of experimentation with SCP-016 must be submitted before and after samples and duplicates of SCP-016 may be taken. Failure to follow these procedures will result in termination or reassignment as Class D personnel. Only authorized personnel may be permitted to obtain samples of and experiment with SCP-016 under BCL-5 containment conditions. If an outbreak does occur despite following the aforementioned procedures, directive-based personnel are to implement a Code Sigma lockdown and containment plan. Infected personnel are to be terminated on site by security forces wearing standard mission-oriented protective posture, MOPP, anti-biological and anti-chemical equipment. Should the infection not be contained after 48 hours, the on-site nuclear device is to be detonated. Remaining personnel are not to be evacuated under any circumstances. SCP-016 has been shown to survive for up to 6 hours on hard surfaces, and up to several minutes in air. High-intensity ultraviolet light and high concentrations of orthophthalealdehyde solution have been demonstrated to be effective in disinfecting non-organic surfaces. Description: SCP-016 is a blood-borne pathogen recovered from a mine worker and data expunged who injured himself while working in a deep coal seam. Said wound became contaminated with coal dust from the mine, possibly infecting the worker with dormant spores. Over the next several days, SCP-016 proceeded to infect the remaining employees at the mining camp, as well as the CDC crisis team dispatched to deal with the epidemic. Foundation personnel then took over the investigation and terminated all affected personnel. Patient Zero was brought into captivity, and the mine shaft was collapsed by explosive device. SCP-016 has an incubation period ranging from 24 hours to 2 years, depending on the presence and number of other human hosts in the area. First symptoms resemble the common cold, and include itchy eyes, runny nose, coughing, and bodily aches. Phase 2 begins in 48 hours, and consists of a controlled form of hemorrhagic fever, as the organism causes a small amount of blood to become aspirated into the lungs, creating an aerosol effect. During Phase 3, the host crashes and bleeds out, bleeding profusely from every bodily orifice, including the nose, tear ducts, anus, skin pores, mouth, urethra, and, in case of females, vagina. Blood pressure skyrockets during the final stage. Hosts have been observed projectile vomiting blood to distances of over 5 meters. Should the host survive this near-total exsanguination, the pathogen will become dormant once more, returning to incubation phase. What distinguishes SCP-016 from other strains of hemorrhagic fever such as Ebola and Marburg is its unusual response to high stress. Should the subject undergo a high-stress situation, such as a life-threatening crisis, the organism will change its survival tactic from rapid reproduction to the rewriting of the host's DNA and stimulation of rapid cell division. Major physiological changes occur within the first 24 hours, with complete bodily reconstruction occurring within 2 weeks' time. Most hosts do not survive the process due to the heavy demands made on the body. An interesting side effect of the transformation is an increased aggressive urge. It is believed that this may be an attempt to maximize the spread of the virus in a manner similar to rabies. On another note, subjects who undergo bodily transformation no longer appear to exhibit SCP-016's hemorrhagic properties. However, subjects infected by transformed hosts will still undergo the normal SCP-016 infection process. Addendum. Experiment log of SCP-016's transformative properties. Subject D016-1, D-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Upon first showing symptoms, subject's quarters were slowly flooded with water over a 24-hour period. SCP-016 mutated into teratomorphic state, transforming subject's lungs into gills. Subject survived for 2 more weeks as SCP-016 transformed its limbs into fins, caused its eyes to atrophy, and enhanced its sense of hearing into a cetacean-type echolocation ability. Subject was terminated by draining all water from its quarters, causing it to asphyxiate. Body was subsequently cremated without autopsy. Subject D016-2, D-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Upon first showing symptoms, subject's quarters were slowly flooded with water over a 24-hour period. SCP-016 mutated into teratomorphic state, causing subject to undergo rapid muscular growth and increased bone growth on knuckles. Subject then attempted to escape from confinement by punching through the reinforced steel door. Subject was not successful and died by drowning. Note: same situation, 2 different responses. Interesting. Doctor data expunged. Subject D016-3, D-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Subject was previously a chemical engineer who poisoned his wife upon discovering her adultery. Upon first showing symptoms, subject's quarters were slowly flooded with water over a 24-hour period. SCP-016 mutated into teratomorphic state, causing subject to grow an unusual organ on his chest, consisting of a chamber and two separate tubes. Organ continued to take in water and swell in size, until Foundation personnel, realizing what SCP-016 may be attempting, terminated the subject by gunshot. Organ was found to contain several gas sacks filled with acetylene gas and oxygen. Subject D-016-4, D-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Subject was told to concentrate on forming wings. No stress was applied. SCP-016 did not mutate into teratomorphic state. Subject died of exsanguination during Phase 3. Subject D-016-5, D-Class personnel infected by SCP-016. Subject was told to concentrate on forming wings and placed in an acrylic box suspended 305 meters, 1,000 feet, above a mine shaft. A timer was placed outside the box which subject was told indicated the time to release. SCP-016 mutated into teratomorphic state, causing subject to grow a tentacle-like organ on his left wrist similar to a spider's spinnerets. Subject extended said organ through one of the box's air holes and extruded a strong, silk-like substance, which it then used to secure the box to the cable. Subject was terminated when the countdown reached 0 and the bomb detonated. Footnotes 1. Due to their similarities as fatal contagions, they stimulate the production of excess organs. A possible link to SCP-1801 is under investigation.
SCP-003 is to be maintained at a constant temperature of no less than 35 degrees Celsius and ideally kept up above 100 degrees Celsius. No living multicellular organisms of level 4 or higher complexity may come into direct contact of SCP-003. In the event of a total power failure, if SCP-0031 begins to increase its mass, personnel assigned must engaged in skin contact with SCP-0031. Ideally, personnel may use their body heat to return SCP-0031 to critical temperature. However, skin contact must always be kept with SCP-003 to avoid SCP-003 reaching activation temperature, lasting at minimum until SCP-0031 reaches its second stage of growth. Personnel who enters SCP-003 containment area must be examined for body parasites of level 4 or above. Personnel whom are found to have parasites must be sterilized before making contact with SCP-003. Any personnel who came into contact with SCP-003 must report for sterilization imminently after contact. SCP-0031 must never be separated from SCP-0032 except in case of emergency procedures detailed. Any change in SCP-0032 rune's activity, including pattern, frequency or color, should be reported in 3 hours of occurrence. Cessation of rune activity must be reported straight away. SCP-0032 must be supplied with power via the source-designed generator 0039 at all times. Description: SCP-003 consists of 2 components of different origin, referred to as SCP-0031 and SCP-0012. SCP-0031 consists of chitin, hair, and nails of unknown origin and biology, arranged in configuration similar to that of a computer motherboard. Testing reveals SCP-0031 to predate earlier known circuit boards by thousands of years. SCP-0031 appears to be sentient but not actively dangerous unless under threat. SCP-003-01 was created for the sole purpose of containing SCP-0032. Partially interpreted data recovered from SCP-0032 may refer to the past and/or potential future LK-class restructuring event caused by SCP-0031. SCP-003 was located by the Remote Viewing Team SRV-04 Beta. It appears possible the SRV-004 Beta was deliberately contacted by SCP-0032. Other organizations have also been alerted to SCP-003's existence, maybe by similar means. Despite this activity, SCP-0032 does not appear to be sentient, based on its lack of reaction to MO3 Gloria analysis and procedures. When SCP-003 drops below temperatures of 35 degrees Celsius, both of the components react. First, SCP-0031 enters a growth state characterized by an extreme increase in mass. This growth consists of two stages. In both stages, SCP-0031 partially fuels its growth by converting matter around it, starting with any material surrounding it, including atmospheric elements, then non-living organic material, including dead skin cells, hair, chitin, enamel, keratin, and other biological materials. The first stage is always the same. SCP-0031 will first increase its mass, then take a form similar in shape to an ephemeroid, brittle star, of 15 meters in diameter. It will form sensory organs that appear to scan the environment around it, and will partially convert the area around it to an unidentified anomalous substance. SCP-0032 seems immune from conversion. During each of SCP-0031's growth stages, SCP-0032 releases bursts of radiation that temporarily inhabits SCP-0031's growth, or reverse this growth when the temperature of SCP-0031 rises above 100 degrees Celsius. Similar radiation emissions have been replicated or recorded via other anomalous means. Addendum 00301, acting on information gathered from linguistic analysis of SCP-0032's runes and comparative data analysis, Research Team MO3 Gloria has managed to establish a link between SCP-003 and data expunged for analysis of functions. SCP-0031 must now be considered sentient, and is to be kept a minimum of 1 kilometer from data expunged, and the resulting byproduct at all times. Addendum 00302, SCP-0032's power loss has been exacerbated by the procedures performed by MO3 Gloria. On orders of 0510, MO3 Gloria will continue procedures. Addendum 00303 during MO3 Gloria procedures, SCP-0031 doubled its mass and began rapid structural growth. Temperature was immediately returned to 100 degrees Celsius. Growth and mass increase of SCP-0031 continued for 9 minutes and 6 seconds, at which time a sustained radiation spike was produced by SCP-0032. In response, SCP-0031 returned to its normal state in 3 minutes and 39 seconds. New growth dissolved into a dusty residue which was collected for analysis. Both SCP-0031 and SCP-0032 seized all detectable activity. SCP-0032 did not resume activity until connected to external power source. SCP-0032's runes glowed uniformly gray and did not resume normal activity for 3 hours. SCP-0032 no longer appears to be able to maintain containment area at a temperature above 35 degrees Celsius without external power supplied by generators 0033-9. Addendum 00304, the procedure detailed in Addendum 00303 was repeated, and SCP-0031 again entered a growth state. After 10 minutes and 13 seconds, SCP-0032 once again produced a sustained radiation spike. SCP-0031's growth stopped for 36 seconds, then resumed at its previous pace. On quadrupling its mass, SCP-0031 formed a coherent outer shell and body. After appearing to scan its environment and partially converting its environment, SCP-0031 then breached containment, entering the observation gallery where 9 members of MO3 Gloria were present. On physical contact with team members, SCP-0031 encompassed them in rapidly grown appendages and stopped growth for 15 minutes. SCP-0031 then resumed growth, and rearranged the component parts of the center of its form to the shape of a 3-meter tall female humanoid, with peripheral tentacles shifting to extrude primarily from SCP-0031's newly formed hair and spine. SCP-0031 then produced rudimentary vocalizations in an apparent initial attempt to communicate with researchers. Data expunged. An unknown individual approached the compromised containment area in company of a full squad of agents. The individual claimed to be acting on orders of O510 and attempted communication with SCP-0031. Data expunged. Following this incident, Agent Jackson of MO3 Gloria successfully restored power to SCP-0032 and activated backup generators to return the temperature to 100 degrees Celsius. SCP-0031 returned to its normal state in 21 minutes and 7 seconds, and was successfully recontained without incident. All 9 members of MO3 Gloria affected by SCP-0031 were afterwards found to be physically unharmed, with no residual effects besides psychological trauma. The converted materials of SCP-003's former containment area did not dissolve and are now under analysis.
We all love a good ghost story, whether it be Chinese whispers or gathered around the campfire telling stories, but have you ever wondered where these stories have come from? After all, a good story is usually based on a true event that may have actually happened. These stories then get changed with each telling of the story, and so the truth being the story changes. This is top 5 ghost stories that may or may not be true.
The mobile phone. A couple of months ago, my friend's cousin, a single mother, brought a new mobile phone. After a long day of work, she came home, placed her phone on the counter, and went to watch TV. Her son came to her and asked if he could play with her new phone. She told him not to call anyone nor mess with text messages, and he agreed. At around 11:20, she was drowsy, so decided to tuck her son in and go to bed. She walked to his room and saw that he wasn't there. She then ran over to her room to find him sleeping on her bed with phone in hand. Relieved, she picked her phone back up from his hand to inspect it. Browsing through it, she noticed only minor changes such as new background, banner, but then she opened up her saved pictures. She began deleting the pictures he had taken, until only one new picture remained. When she first saw it, she was in disbelief. It was her son sleeping on her bed, but the picture was taken by someone else above him and it showed the left half of an elderly woman's face.
I sat on the bus. On my way to school, listening to music and paying little to no attention to the other students. At one of the stops my mind snapped back to reality. I looked towards the small house. Tommy's house, I thought. A hand slipped through the drapes of the window and waved the bus driver to move on. He's sick, I thought, paying no large amount of attention to the situation. The day flew by, and after school, I watched the local news channel, and what I heard paralyzed me. Tommy's entire family was murdered that day by an unknown suspect. After hearing this news, I moved back up to my room and quietly fell asleep. The next day, I sat on the bus. We drove past Tommy's house, and the bus driver, being unaware of Tommy's family fate, stopped at his home. As I was about to get up and explain to her what had happened, something caught my eye. A pale hand slipped through the drapes of the window and waved the bus driver to move on. I sat on the bus, terrified.
The impish ghost. My neighbor Diane and I had a playful poltergeist for years, and we called it Billy. I'd come home and find something put in weird places. Milk in cupboard, toilet paper in the fridge, laundry detergent in the bathtub. Diane once called to ask if Billy had been around, because she couldn't find a gallon of milk. We finally found it outside on her back steps, and sugar. Done sugar. Every morning, my sugar bowl was empty. When I had enough, I'd point to Diane home and yell, "Go see Diane." Within 5 minutes, I'd get a call from her, and she'd say thanks a lot, because he'd gone and pulled shenanigans at her place. This occurred for the entire 2 years we lived there. No one believed us, not even our husbands. My mother thought someone was stealing from us when we were sleeping or out of the house. My sister believed something was going on but didn't know what. I still can't explain any of it. The crib shadow. I was babysitting my niece while I was staying at my brother's place, and they had the baby camera set up so I could see her on the little TV it came with. I was studying and started dozing off when I heard someone whispering and realized it was coming from the monitor. I initially thought it was some feedback or something, but when I looked at the TV there was a dark shadow near my niece's crib. I have never been more terrified in my life, but the shadow was clearly there where it had not been before. I ran to my niece's room and looked around and saw nothing, but I took her the hell out of there. I went back to the TV, and the shadow was clearly gone. I told my brother what had happened, and he pulled me aside and told me not to mention it to my sister-in-law because she'll freak out, but that he had seen the same thing several times now, with the same whispering. They stayed in that house for about 4 more years, and when my niece was just learning to talk she would tell her mom about her special friend. To this day, it scares me. When they moved out, my brother told me my niece had become inconsolably sad because she would miss her friend. Her mom would tell her she could bring him along, but all she would say that he couldn't leave the house. We have never to this day told about that damn shadow, and she apparently never saw it.
The Rocking Horse. One night, when I was maybe 10-12, I had trouble falling asleep. My bedroom was the entire top floor of our house, with my bed and such being on the left side and storage closets and a play area being on the right. I was lying in bed when I heard noise from the other side of the room and see a rocking horse begin to rock. It was sitting just outside one of the storage closet doors. It proceeded to rock its way halfway across the room and stopped dead under the ceiling light. At this point I was freaking out and just buried my head under my blankets and never peeked out again until morning. It was all confirmed to not be a dream, as the rocking horse was still in the middle of my room when I woke up. Furthermore, I got a stern reprimand from my parents for being up out of bed playing with my toys well past my bedtime. Their bedroom was directly below the storage closet, play area, and had heard the creaking of the rocking horse shuffling across the room.
Item, SCP-006, the Fountain of Youth. Object Class, Safe. Description: SCP-006 is a very small spring located 60 kilometers of Astrakhan. Foundation Command was aware of its existence since the 19th century, but were unable to secure it until 1991 due to political reasons. On the spot of the spring, a chemical factory has been constructed as a disguise, with the majority of laborers under Foundation and/or Russian control. The liquid emitted from the spring has been chemically identified as simple mineral water in 1902, but has the unusual property of health. Ingesting the liquid produces the following properties in human beings: the ability to regenerate DNA damaged by sufficient duplication, heightened excitement of cellular duplication, vastly improved abilities in the repair of damaged tissue, and a frightening increase in the effectiveness of the human immune system. Upon testing the liquid on animal subjects, hostile bacteria and viral agents were destroyed immediately. Many reptiles and birds were unaffected, while higher primates experienced the same benefits as humans. Special containment procedures: whereas the nature of SCP-006 does not warrant any extensive containment, a certain level of secrecy is necessary regarding objects' properties, for obvious reasons. The following procedures not for personnel safety, but to deny or hide